what would it take for you guys to sign up to be a familiar for Dracula? Because there's not a lot of pros besides eternal life, and there's some other like powers and stuff in there. But is there anything a Dracula type figure could say to you to get you to go, yeah, I'm in?
I think I would just need a guarantee that I'm not going to need to eat any bugs.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
I would just say, sir, Mr. Cage, just promise me I don't have to eat any bugs and I'll do whatever you want.
But Austin, the bugs give you the superpowers.
Apparently.
But they don't, it's not like you imitate what you eat. I guess you just get super strength. I don't know.
Yellow eyes.
This is a better Ant-Man movie, I guess.
I mean, I would hope so. That movie sucked dick. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Arnies. We're three guys that now want Nicolas Cage to be in every single Universal monster movie ever. I'm Matt Johnson, and I got a nosebleed right before this recording, so I guess Dracula might be after me soon.
I'm Keith Baker, and now I'm definitely not going back to New Orleans.
And I'm Austin Terry, and I'm thinking we can all credit the success of Morbius with the recent comeback of vampire media.
I guess. Unfortunately, that movie failed, and it failed twice, so I don't know what you're talking about. On today's show, of course, we are talking about another spring movie release with Nicholas Hoult and Nicolas Cage's Renfield. Austin and Keith, I know we talked about the unbearable weight of massive talent last year. I think that was our first Nick Cage movie we talked about on the podcast, which is a shame for me because I wish we had talked about 20 at least already to that point. Love that movie. My boy Keith, of course, my best friend, unfortunately, Austin, was also with me. Austin hated it, but it doesn't matter. We are back with more Nicolas Cage content, and I'm very excited. But my actual genuine question is, when you hear about a movie like this, where, you know, there's a movie called Renfield, Nicholas Hoult's playing the main character, and then you have Nick Cage kind of in the background playing Dracula, do you have any expectations for that? Does that sound exciting? I mean, Nick Cage has been making, I think, a comeback critically lately, at least with things like Pig and Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent we talked about. But Renfield is a more traditional blockbuster, and you may say, who cares about that? But I think it's kind of noteworthy because we really haven't seen that from him since something like 2010's Kick-Ass when it comes to mind, because he's kind of stayed away from some of those blockbuster pieces of content. So having no expectations makes sense, is what I'm trying to say. But regardless, whether or not you did, what are your non-spoiler thoughts on Renfield? And did you have any thoughts going in?
I mean, for me, I actually got pretty hyped for this movie. I thought the marketing was very effectively done. I was kind of expecting a Cocaine Bear experience where just a good time at the movies, maybe some good laughs in there, some good jokes. And for me, unfortunately, I think it's becoming a trend now where it's another spring and it's another Nick Cage letdown for me. I did not have a good time with Renfield. I will say, as opposed to something like The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, I think the highlight for this movie is Nick Cage. And I think the downside is everything else. Everything that's not Nick Cage on the screen I thought was horrible in this film. It weirdly is trying to be an action movie, and that's not what I got from the marketing. The side characters are awful, and I don't think it's their fault. I think the writing is the major default of this film. Nicholas Hoult, I think, is really good, especially when he's interacting with Nicolas Cage, but everybody else, who cares? So for me, I think this was a letdown because I paid and went out to theaters to see this. I think if I had seen this on streaming, on Netflix or something, I probably wouldn't feel as down on it. I think anybody that's a Nick Cage fan should definitely go out and see this. I think you'll get something out of it. But other than that, I would say wait till streaming to see this one.
I didn't have much expectations going in. I was kind of excited to see Nick Cage as Dracula, though. I'm like, okay, let's see what he can do with this, because I feel like he's going to bring some goofy elements to it that'll make it fun, which he did. And I'm with Austin. I think he is the highlight of this movie. Everything else, kind of same as you, Austin. I think everything else kind of just fell to the wayside. I was kind of ready for the movie to be over. I thought the set pieces were pretty cool. I thought it was cool that it took place in New Orleans. Kind of has that voodoo thing going on in the background. So cool setting. I'm with you though. Side characters didn't have the best writing. I thought some of them were just really goofy. There was not a lot of stakes to them at all.
And goofy, and then like borderline annoying for some of them too.
Yeah, some of them were just annoying. Wasn't sure what they were trying to go for here. I did get kind of confused. It's like, okay, is this a comedy? Is this an action? Are they trying to tell like a Dracula story? So yeah, it's kind of all over the place in that regard. But overall, I don't think it's really theater worthy. But something that would be fun to go just put on Netflix or HBO or whatever and just have a good time for an hour and a half.
Yeah, I'm not far off. I kind of agree. I think this one was fine. I think the sounds that come off of the word fine are kind of a good review for this movie. It's fine. Like, I don't know. It was kind of whatever to me. As somebody that has watched most of Nicolas Cage's filmography, I gotta say, my biggest criticism is if he's not in the movie that much, I don't like it.
I thought he would be a more central character in this film. Yeah. He's kind of a side character.
I did too,
really
but weirdly, I thought he was in a decent amount of it, and when he was in it, I thought it was great. But the problem is, when he's not in it, just everything kind of sucks. I think Nicholas Hoult is very good as Renfield, but the romance plot, some of the action stuff, some of like the comedy outside of the Dracula element, it's like none of that really worked quite at all, to be honest. So if it had, I would have been fine with Nick Cage playing a side character because he does that, relatively often. But here, even though he's playing a big kind of like loud character, it was like those were the only scenes I was really excited about. So yeah, I kind of think like Keith said, if you're a big fan, then you got to go see, Nick Cage play Dracula, because that's pretty huge. I'm a big Vampire's Kiss fan. He played a vampire in that movie. And here he's back, and this time he's playing Dracula. So it's kind of a step up. I just really... My really sad non-spoiler thought is I just really fucking wish this movie was better. It sounds so sad. Yeah. I really think it could have been. I like the idea of Nick Cage playing not the main character. I kind of like the Renfield angle, and he's this huge, like, loud Dracula character, but it just... The ratio is a bit off, and the, like, making it a weird action romance, it could have worked, but I just don't think it did in the long run.
And the other issue for me, too, is the trailer showed all of the funny jokes. So nothing hit for me because I already knew the punchline. So that may not be an issue if you've missed the marketing for this movie. And I think there could have been some good laugh-out-loud moments in the theater, but I'd already seen these jokes promoted for 3 months now.
Yeah, very fair. All right, guys. So, this is one of those rare times where we're going to move into our spoiler territory right here. But before we get there, let's do a very quick final moment. Is there any reason to see this in the theaters, do you think?
Only if you're a Nick Cage fan.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I guess I would agree. I'm a huge Nick Cage fan. But even I would say, I think waiting isn't going to hurt you too much. So... Kind of a dud, not bad by any means, but not the best. Not what we were hoping for. So we're going to go ahead and get into spoilers. So if you have not seen Renfield, make sure you go and watch it and then come on back to our episode where we get into all the juicy details.
I'm called Dracula. His Transylvanian accent is actually really good in this movie.
It's not bad. It sounds like Nick Cage. Anyway, Austin and Keith, as always, I cannot wait. We have an interesting lineup here, and I'm very curious what the highlights could even be. So, Austin and Keith, who is the cast and crew for this movie?
All right, so Renfield is directed by Chris McKay, who you may know from the Lego Batman movie, The Tomorrow War, Robot Chicken, and he wrote the story for the recent D&D movie. It's written by Ryan Ridley, with a story by Robert Kirkman, who you of course know from Walking Dead and Invincible fame. Our score for the film is composed by Marco Beltrame, and of course, based on characters by Bram Stoker, which is interesting because this is actually supposed to be a sequel to the original 1931 Dracula with Bela Lugosi.
All right, going to our cast, we have Nicholas Hoult as Renfield, Awkwafina as Rebecca Quincy, Ben Schwartz as Teddy Lobo, and we got Shohreh Aghdashloo as Bella Francesca Lobo, and we got the great and powerful Nicolas Cage as Count Dracula. All right, guys, there's our cast and crew. Any positives, any negatives? What do we got?
I would give a positive to Nick Cage, but I'm going to save that for my dear friend Matt to do. So I will give a negative to the writing for this movie. Ryan Ridley and amazingly Robert Kirkman. I did not know he was attached to this project. It's all horrible when it's not Dracula. So that is 85% of the movie. So that means I think 85% of this movie is terrible. I guess the only like good thing is the Nicholas Hoult, like when he's interacting with Dracula, like we talked about. But all the side characters, the weird romance between Awkwafina and Nicholas Hoult, the weird Teddy Lobo crime family, the weird murdering her father story, like all that was just so horrible and like felt like the most basic like surrounding plot they could have come up with. So I thought the writing was pretty trash for this one.
Okay, I'll go next. We don't have to wait too long to bring up our boy. I mean, it's Nick Cage. I just think this performance is what you want from him. I think it was so lively. The way Dracula looked in this movie, I thought was so good. It was so fun. The way that he was able to kind of wear these prosthetics and makeup and still kind of move his face, and like the way he was talking and like adjust his voice. It was so perfect. It was so Nick Cage, but also so Dracula. So it was just such a win. I mean, I think Austin kind of alluded to. I mean, that's the reason why you make this movie. It's because, hey, Nick Cage wants to play Dracula. It's like, oh, fuck. What script do we have? And it's like, well, let me tell you, it's not a good one. It's like, oh, okay, let's do it anyway. So that part kind of sucks, but he was great. I loved watching him. He was fantastic.
He was so good that his performance convinced me we need Bangkok Dangerous 2.
Oh, we don't. I promise we don't.
I'll shout out a positive to Nicholas Hoult. I don't think he was terrible in this.
He was good.
That's fair.
He was
fair.
good.
I did like his scenes in like the anonymous group. And some of his mannerisms, and just kind of the way he carried himself around Dracula, like he was kind of skittish. All that comedy kind of worked for me. It's pretty funny to watch. The only thing that didn't work with me, and going back to the negative on the writing, would be his relationship with Awkwafina's character, Rebecca Quincy, was awkward and weird, and I didn't know what they were trying to do with it. And that goes to her character as well, too, the negative. Not that Awkwafina played Quincy bad, but most of these people seem to just accept that there's a vampire. Like there's not, there's not really like a vampire? That can't be true. And she's just like, oh, you work for Count Dracula? Oh, cool. So I thought that was kind of weird.
Everything with her felt like a CW crime show where it's like, they killed my father, I'm going to get my revenge. And I don't know, felt very cheap.
Yeah, from like a writing standpoint, I understood why she was in it. We need to find a way to get Renfield to want to leave Dracula. Could we have not done any better or found any better of a way? And I love both Nicholas Hoult and Awkwafina, to be fair, but it's just like their chemistry specifically together didn't really hit for me. And then it's just like by the end, it's like, I guess this is the reason. And I don't buy it. And I should, because the whole movie is about him like, I gotta get away from this guy. So it shouldn't be too hard to be like a genuine reason of like wanting to leave him. So it was a little off.
The problem too is every time Awkwafina and Nicholas Hoult interact, he's either cutting people's arms off with dinner platters or eating bugs. So it's not exactly like lending to the romance.
So you know what we thought about Renfield? What is everybody else saying? We got some interesting thoughts here. So Renfield actually has been receiving mixed reviews and currently has a 60% over on Rotten Tomatoes. The site's critical consensus is, although it fails to take full advantage of its committed stars and killer premise, Renfield's baddie horror comedy blend sinks in just enough to leave an impression. Praise, of course, went toward Cage's Dracula, and some of the one-off gags actually received a lot of praise, but criticism did go towards the romance plot, which we talked about, and actually just kind of the overall story arc when it came to the characters and kind of their journeys throughout the movie, with the exception of Dracula, because that's kind of a hard character to have an arc for. But everybody else, they tried, and I think kind of failed a little bit.
I think it's just too small scale. Like, it just doesn't feel very important. It's way too, like, it feels like it's one block in New Orleans that this is happening in. And maybe that wouldn't be a big deal if the story was more interesting. But at one point, they allude to Dracula. He's back to full strength. He actually wants to enact a plan to take over the world. And I think that may have been more interesting, but then the movie ends like right after that.
Yeah. And they kind of, that doesn't happen and they win. And then it's like, oh, okay. So, yeah, it happens very weirdly quickly. And also, I guess I should get it out of the way. Let's just get the sad stuff out because I feel like kind of crying right now. This movie cost $65 million to make, which is quite literally insane. I don't know why they spent that much on this. That's fucking crazy.
They needed him to throw an arm and impale somebody, and it had to look good.
But I mean, you can do that for not quite that much. You could do that for like $200.
They needed him to step on someone's head and have blood shoot up 3 stories high.
I guess. I feel like I did that in some college movies. I of course, I personally hope this movie does well. Based on the weekend take, which we'll get into, it doesn't seem to be the case. But I mean, Deadline is reporting. We'll see what happens in the later days. But as of right now, the 3-day box office take is $7.7 million. And again, like we said, the movie cost $65 million to make. So if we're including marketing, I mean, we are looking at $130 million plus. So if your first weekend is 8, it's not a good sign, partner.
Oofa!
I personally hope this movie ends up doing well somehow, whether it be in theaters or like on VOD. Because I want to see more horror comedies. And it sounds like we all agree. Is this a great one? No. But I love that like specific subgenre, so I want to see more of that. And like we said earlier, I mean, Nick Cage is an actor that's kind of had a resurgence in the last couple of years. But the idea of him doing more blockbusters is kind of exciting. So it's like whenever they announced Renfield, I have to be honest, that was kind of my main excitement. It's like, oh, wow, if this does really well, then we may see a National Treasure thing. We may see him pop up in a huge like blockbuster Quentin Tarantino movie again. That'd be really cool. But now it sounds less likely. But either way, that was my hope.
I really hope everybody took a salary instead of a percentage of box office returns deal.
Very fair, very fair. All right, guys, I think we've kind of gone into most of this, but maybe there's a little bit more we can kind of dive into here. But let's go ahead and get into our roundtable discussion and break this all down. That's, of course, the main part of our show where we each come to the table with a point or two, something that we feel like we want to talk about in more depth. I have one that, if you guys don't mind, I'll start with. And I'm very curious. It's always funny watching movies without you guys because... especially when they're comedies, because it's like, whenever we review them, it's like, well, here's this part that was funny, here's this part that wasn't, but it's very subjective. But my opinion was, this seems to be a comedy before anything else. Of course, there are a lot of horror elements in there, and everybody is saying there are horror elements in there, and I think like the idea of horror is being kind of co-opted. It's like, if there's a lot of gore in something, then it seems like that means it's going to be a horror movie now or whatever. Where do you guys want to start with this? Like, did you like the balance of the comedy and horror? Because to me, it was like, it felt like they were trying to make a comedy and just have like horror / Dracula elements on the side. And I feel like they just like totally messed up the balance, and that made me feel bad because I've been watching a lot of interviews with both Nicholas Hoult and Nicolas Cage, and it seems like they were like, the cool thing about this movie is the balance of the comedy and horror, and I was like, I just don't think that's accurate.
Yeah, the short answer for me is no. And I actually would say I think they set out to make a horror comedy movie, and then they ended up with an action film.
Yeah.
There's way too much action in this movie, and way more than I was expecting. And I don't think there's enough horror for me personally, especially with Dracula and vampires being involved. Every time they do anything that should be quote unquote scary, it's usually coming off of a joke or an action set piece. So it doesn't lend to anything like actually kind of creeping you out or anything like that. If there had been more of that, I would probably be feeling more positive on the movie. And what is the scariest part of this Renfield Dracula premise? To me, it's going to meet this guy in the 1900s and then not realizing you've signed up to be stuck with him for all of eternity doing his bidding. So, and Keith, I know this is something you want to get into, but if the focus had been more of, here's everything Renfield and Dracula have done throughout the 1900s, here's why it's scary, Renfield's trapped with this monster, and then we end up in present day, and maybe throughout there is some like really dark comedy, I think that is the more interesting movie. But a weird crime story in New Orleans that just happens to have Dracula just didn't retain my attention for a full hour and a half.
No. Yeah. I think they could have done without the Lobo crime family thing. if he's going out because maybe Renfield stops doing his bidding for him, now he's going out and killing innocent people, and Renfield has to work with Awkwafina to stop him.
And that could have been interesting too, if Dracula doesn't know that maybe throughout these whole 100 years he's only been feeding him bad people, and then Nicholas Hoult decides he wants out, and now he's out going killing innocents, and Nicholas Hoult realizes he has to stop that. I think there's a way more interesting way to do this similar premise, but just have a better story.
Yeah, I think there's just a premise issue. Because, one of the biggest surprises to me, and I don't think they said this in the marketing, but the fact that this is specifically a direct sequel to the 1931 Dracula movie. And to Austin's, last point, the idea that, of course, if this is a sequel, that means Renfield and Dracula have been kind of going at it for almost 100 years. That's super interesting. So it's if you want to make it serious at the beginning and then make it more of a odd couple type relationship towards the present day,
yeah,
that'd be funny as fuck. Now, if you want to do it, I don't know, something different and go the action, like you said, they could have done that too. I think this is a classic example of just trying to tackle too many things at once. It's comedy, it's drama, it's romance, it's action, it's horror, and it's you should have picked one. I mean, this is an 1.5 hour long movie. You should have picked one because it does not work when it's all forced in there. Some of those little bits work, but not all of it, and nowhere close to all of it.
I think there should have been a lot more scenes with them together. I like the one apartment scene they get.
That scene was great.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
Why didn't we got
my favorite scene?
We needed 10 more of those scenes. We needed scenes with Renfield in his lair, bringing him bodies one after the other. We needed a montage of some sort, whether it was in modern day New Orleans or older times in Transylvania or whatever. We needed some sort of montage to see their relationship over 100 years or so.
I'm shocked we didn't get him out on Bourbon Street. What were they thinking?
Nick loves Bourbon Street. Nick Cage purchased a pyramid in a graveyard, and then he ended up having to give it back because he didn't have enough money. But there's just a pyramid sitting there where Nick Cage can, I guess, get buried under.
He also owns the murder house in New Orleans, too.
I don't think anymore, though. He definitely used to. There should be a movie about that. There should be a movie, a sequel to Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, where it's just Nick losing all of these iconic things.
Well, he's definitely not making any money from this movie after those box office numbers.
We'll see what happens.
He clearly did not invest his National Treasure money very well.
Well, he definitely did. He lost all that. I did want to know, because this is a very weird movie. It's kind of a weird, shitty R.I.P. It's a weird, shitty, comedy, drama, romance, horror take, like we said earlier, on Dracula, essentially. Do we want to see that for other, universal monster properties? We have things like Frankenstein, The Mummy, Invisible Man. And some of those things we've seen great versions of recently. I always think of the Lee Winnell version of The Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss a few years ago, which was phenomenal. But that's not in line with these monsters, which is fine, but it's just very different. So I'm just curious for you guys, do you want to see a version of these in the future? Because I always think about how they tried to make Tom Cruise's The Mummy, and that was supposed to give us Russell Crowe's Jekyll and Hyde. That was supposed to give us Johnny Depp's The Invisible Man, Javier Bardem's Frankenstein's monster, and they were like, uh-oh, this movie failed, we can't do it. Part of me is whenever they make stuff with the Dracula story, it's because there's such a strong IP there. Is there something specific you guys want to see with these other stories?
The Mummy's an interesting thing, actually, to compare this to Renfield, because that's another one that is very action-focused. And so it seems like Universal wants their Universal Monster franchise to be these, action hits. And I think they're kind of missing the point of these franchises. I think these have a place in modern cinema. I think you can keep doing these. I'd love to see a Creature of the Black Lagoon movie. That's one of my favorite
Nice.
Universal monster movies. But I think they're really missing out on the dark horror elements of these creatures, and I think they should just be owning the month of October at the box office. Like they could have a really good like continuous year where every October there's a new Universal monster movie out there. I think they're kind of getting away by leaning in toward like the action comedy side of what I guess you could try and make these movies be.
I was thinking that too, Austin, like as far as Halloween season goes, like this would have been a great Halloween movie, or it could have been a great Halloween movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely down to see him like in the more darker side, like you said, pick a side, either be a comedy or be a darker comedy action.
I mean, isn't this called the Dark Universe? Where's the darkness? Because they're making it pretty funny.
Because you could have easily just taken the action out of this movie and made it like a Disney Halloween movie.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
You're not far from it.
And I guess that kind of ties into the universe they've been trying to create. I'm not one, I enjoy like the highlights of the MCU and the DC stuff and the Star Wars stuff, but most of it to me is kind of bland or bad. But something here I think could really be special with the right performer and the right like director, producer, and writer, whatever it may be. It's just like this one wasn't it, but it's like telling a story where you have Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, like Austin said, Invisible Man. That would be great. I would love a modern version of that. We're overdue for this. How cool would that be if it was a bit more serious? Maybe there's a little bit of levity here and there, but not too much. I think if it was R-rated, that could be super cool. I'm not saying that because this movie didn't work for me. It's just that this one's balance, like we've talked about, was all over the place and not great. I'm very excited, despite that, for particularly a really solid Frankenstein movie. I want to see a great actor cast as Frankenstein and a great actor cast as Frankenstein's monster. Like, I don't know who it would be. I can't really predict it. I think once they announce it, I'm probably just going to go, oh, that's perfect. I don't know who it's going to be, but I'm excited for that because I feel like there are way more good Frankenstein adaptations than Dracula.
It's crazy that Universal owns all these properties and really have not done much with them.
Yeah.
I mean, they, like we said, they really could be owning the month of October. I'm curious because this rumor pops up all the time, but Brendan Fraser has said he would do another Mummy movie. Do you think that's the way to go? Should they bring him back and try to reboot this franchise with him?
So to be fair, when Brendan Fraser did The Mummy, they definitely were not like tying that trilogy into like the other Universal monsters. But
they could.
Now that the MCU has happened, we might need to.
The Mummyverse.
That'd be pretty fucking sick. But here's what I'll say. I only want to see Brendan Fraser involved with The Mummy if they figured all this other shit out.
I mean, he could be our Sam Jackson.
Yeah. If we get like a good Van Helsing, like a mummy, and get Brendan Fraser back in there for the mummy part of it, that would be incredible. But we need to figure this franchise out. And I don't know why it's so hard. Because I feel like it shouldn't be.
And I don't know why it's so hard to make a vampire movie with like classic vampire hunters with Van Helsing. Why haven't we gotten a good one of those?
Well, part of that, Austin, part of that is this movie didn't do it. This was like, let's do Nicolas Hoult and Nick Cage. And Matt Johnson loves Nick Cage, but we're not doing like a traditional Dracula story. It's more of like this weird comedy, romance, horror thing, like I keep saying. But it's like if we do something more traditional, maybe we can get off the ground a bit, put Van Helsing in there. If we had introduced Van Helsing in this in like kind of like a new way, that could have been kind of cool. If he's just kind of lurking in the background, that could have been kind of fun. And then do your own thing. I don't know. I think we just like if you look like genuinely, if you look back at like the last 15 years, they keep trying to introduce characters like Dracula, Frankenstein, Black Lagoon, the Mummy, of course. Yeah, pretty much all of them, and it's all failed. And it's like you're doing it wrong.
Did you guys get the Dracula boat horror movie trailer before this one?
Yes. The Voyage of the Demeter.
And that is a horror Dracula movie.
That looks
where
cool.
They're stuck on this boat with Dracula. I have a feeling it's going to flop, but the premise from the trailers looks really cool.
It's going to 100% flop, but it looks really good.
Who's playing Dracula?
It looks like the version of Dracula from Midnight Mass.
Yeah,
Like that kind
that's
of
a good
design.
description. Originally, Viggo Mortensen was supposed to star, but now it's Liam Cunningham from Game of Thrones and Corey Hawkins and some other cool people. It's a good cast. I mean,
I hope that
the
one's good.
idea, I mean, like we're kind of saying, Austin, like premises, like what it's all about. I mean, the idea of kind of Dracula for the first time being unleashed while people from like 300 years ago are like on a boat from like the UK to the US or whatever it may be, and they can't go anywhere. It's like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
So
that's a great idea.
I hope it's good. I've been hearing about this idea for years, the specific script. I'm glad it's on being made, so let's hope it happens.
I just think that's what you need to do with Dracula specifically. I think it's got to be a serious movie. It's got to be scary. Because if you try to, like, it just comes off as goofy if you don't do it that way, where he's like this opulent guy who's rich and has a side man that eats bugs. Like, there's so much dumb stuff that if you don't do it right, it's just going to flop on the screen.
Yeah, I honestly, at this point, think he has to be, like, super nonchalant. I think Dracula has to be a character that doesn't really care about any of those things, like you just said.
Yeah.
I think it just has to be, like, he's kind of, like, moseying on about, and then somebody like Renfield or a character that knows them, or maybe Van Helsing, just, like, shows up and is like, I'm here for you. And he's like, oh, like, fuck. Shit, my bad. Wait, I'm not prepared for this. So, like, that could be like another stage of it, but they're just not doing that. They're just like, let's try and do weird horror comedies. And there's good stuff about it, but not great
So
stuff
many
about
goofy stuff.
it. Yeah.
On the flip side of that, though, Matt, something I would love to see in live action would be a Castlevania-style movie where you have Dracula at the height of his powers. He's got his castle, he's got his armies, and it's in medieval times, and you have everyday people trying to like wage war against this army. How have we not gotten that yet? Like, I think that could be cool too.
I want to see that because when they cut back to like the quick flashbacks with Renfield and Dracula becoming partners or whatever, or Renfield starting to work for him, I was like, oh, that looks cool, like a black and white or like a weird filter on it. Like going back to, I don't know if y'all have ever seen Young Frankenstein.
And I will say I love the filter on this movie. I thought that looked so fucking good.
Well, they inserted them into the classic. That's what's cool about
which was it was cheap. It was a cheap win, but it was really, I really liked it. Yeah.
I think, vampires are having a rise right now. I think we're due for some more medieval movies too. So maybe they'll merge the genre.
I'd be down for that.
All right, everybody, before we close out here, let's get into, of course, our Arnies Podcast Awards. This is the part of our show where we break down things that are positive, negative, or something in between. It doesn't matter what it is. It just has to be something that we think deserves specific praise. So, Austin and Keith, what are you thinking? What should we award today?
Yes, I'm going to be giving the Worst Meeting Place Award. And I don't know if this stood out to you guys, but when Awkwafina is on the phone with her sister, she says, meet me at Café du Monde. And if anybody has been to New Orleans, you know Café du Monde is a tourist place. It always has lines out the door. You would never meet there because there would be nowhere to sit down. It's an in-and-out place.
That's fair.
When she said, meet me at Café du Monde, I audibly in the theater was like, Café du Monde? Why would you meet there? My wife had to elbow me in my side.
That's very fair.
I was thinking the same exact thing. Speaking of her sister, I'm going to give the most pointless character award to Quincy's sister. Because like I felt like they were trying to build something with her, like, oh, okay, they're sisters, her dad died, they had that in common. And then she just ends up about to die.
Dead.
Yeah, dead.
R.I.P., baby.
We don't really know how that happened. Yeah. She gets the most pointless character award.
I think I might have the most powerful award that's ever been given on the entirety of our show. We're coming up on 3 years, and Keith, I am disappointed that you were not there for our last episode talking about Star Wars in the future.
Yeah.
So I know it has quite literally nothing to do with this episode, but I'm going to give Keith the award for the youngest boy most excited about the future of Star Wars. And I don't know or care if he knows about it. Through all of this, when we were like talking about Renfield, like whenever I was sitting in silence watching you guys say whatever you guys liked or didn't like, I was like, man, this movie kind of sucked. I was just thinking about, I wish Keith was on the last one. That would have been really fun. That was a good episode. But he wasn't there. So, Keith, I think you might like the future of Mando, Ahsoka, the Acolyte, whoever gives a fuck about it. We don't know. So R.I.P. R.I.P. to you, I guess, and Star Wars.
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, with that, everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you hit that follow button so you never miss our upcoming content. And of course, at the Arnies is our social, and the Arnies.media is the website. We'll be back next Tuesday for another episode.
And we want to hear from you guys, so please send us a message on Instagram at the Arnies or email us, thearniesmedia@gmail.com. What did you think of Renfield? Is Austin a Nick Cage stalker? Should we arrest Austin? Anything you say we'll read on the show and react to it live on our latest episode.
I'm basically Pedro Pascal's character from The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
I think you're putting too much talent in your corner.
Well, it depends what performance you're getting, though. If it's his Mando performance, it's not enough talent.
That's very fair. He might be gone. Who's to say?
Grogu, no.
Grogu,
I have to get back to Mandalore and bathe in the waters of the living.
Grogu, don't watch the Arnie's podcast again. We'll see you next week. And this is us signing off. Goodbye.
See ya.
I'll try to find the light in the darkness.